Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel again. So this is our fourth video in the series to the beginner's path to new bike day. Hope you've been enjoying the series so far. Today we are going to talk about bike geometry. I'm not going to do a deep dive. I promise to keep this as short as possible, but there are certain things that we need to cover and need to discuss when you're looking for your new bike. So stay tuned.
Nice.
Dirty That is so smooth.
So video topic number 4 is bike geometry. Now, this is the video where I'm going to talk about the two bikes that I picked for this series. Now, these two bikes are both hardtails. As I discussed previously, we're only going to talk about hardtails in this series. And also these two bikes are Bike Shop brand bikes. I picked these bikes because they hit the nail on the head when it comes to modern geometry for the cross-country bike and modern geometry for the trail bike. So this is not a piece where, oh, you should buy this, but I think you should buy this bike, because that's not what this is. This is two bikes that I randomly picked, that I looked at in quite a bit of detail and did a ton of research on as well. And these are the two bikes that came out pretty high up there. And it's also a deviation away from Kona and Trek, which is, I ride Trek and my son rides Kona, so I wanted to go away from those two bike brands and pick something a little bit different than what we normally see on this channel. So let's do a quick talk about the cross-country bike first. We're going to go comparatively speaking side by side. So the cross-country bike that I picked is a Specialized Chisel. If you've never heard of this bike, go and take a look it up and check it out so that you have reference for what we're talking about. So this bike I found at $2,100, give or take $100. I chose this bike because of all the great reviews that I had read in my research, and mostly, of course, because it checks off all the boxes when it comes to geometry specification, frame spec, through axles, and its weight. Basically speaking, the reason you would want an XC bike is because you'd want a lighter bike. You want to go on super long trail rides. You're going to be the type of person that wears spandex and lycra. You don't plan on any large, like real large feature trail progression. You want a faster bike and maybe plan to do some XC races in the future.
Yeah.
This is what I'm thinking. Why you want an XC
hard
bike
finish,
for.
buddy.
Also, your trails dictate whether you do well to have an XC bike. Now let's talk about trail bike. The trail bike I picked was the Rocky Mountain Growler 40. I found this bike for $2,099. So $2,099. I've also seen this bike more recently on sale. I'm just going to stick with the $2,099. So basically, they're both the same price points. I chose the Rocky Mountain Growler 40, one because, again, it's on sale most every place I look for it. Rocky Mountain Bicycle Company is a Canadian company. It's a Canadian bike company. They produce awesome bikes, and this bike just screams capability. And it hits all the right points when it comes to a trail hardtail. So you'd want a trail bike if you're looking for loving both the ups and the downs, so the climbs and the descents. But mostly looking for a bike that is capable of climbing well and hitting those descents or downhills with a ton of confidence. Also for large trail feature progression.
Nice.
Honestly speaking, you can ride either type of bike on any trail, but you will find the limits of a bike quite quickly. when not riding something that is made to do things that you want it to do. So just remember that. That's the whole reason why we're doing this video series. So having the right bike for the right type of trails, but not only the right type of trails, having the right bike for the right type of riding that you want to do or are going to be doing. So let's talk a little bit quickly about price points. I realize that $2,000 for a bike is a far stretch for people. It's a far stretch for me. But this series is about beginners who know what they want and that want more from their bikes. You may already own a bike you paid $1,000 or less for. But you're here watching this video series because you found limitations of your current ride. Whether it be upgrading limitations or the usual progression limitations. My guess is you have an older bike with old geometry and older component specifications. You're likely still riding a triple chainring up front with front derailleur, and but hopefully you've removed the kickstand that came with the bike originally. You don't ride it with a bike with a kickstand on a trail because if the kickstand happens to drop down and you're cornering into a left turn, you're basically, your kickstand acts as a pivot to your bike and down you go. Do not ride trails with a kickstand. I'm sure you already know that by now though. Anyway, that's enough about kickstand. Okay, so bike geo, let's get into it. Let's take a look at this. So cross-country bikes usually have steeper angles compared to trail bikes to improve the handling. The head angles are usually between 69 and 71 degrees. Usually they have steeper seat tube angles for climbing more efficiently. And they also have shorter wheelbases as well as shorter chainstay lengths. The trail bikes on the polar opposite have slacker geo to improve performance going downhill. Their head angles usually range from 65 to 68 degrees. So head angles, wheelbase, chainstay, and two other ones that I'm going to mention a little bit in a few minutes. Let's start with head angles because this is what most people usually get hung up on. Most people concern themselves with the head angle most about any kind of geo. The first thing that they look at in geometry, oh, how slack is the head angle? So let's look at that quickly first. XC versus trail. So head angle will be much steeper as stated previously, between 69 and 71. So as you can see, our chisel is a 68 degree head tube angle, which is about right for current XC geo. It's a little bit slacker. It's very modern. 68 is quite a modern head tube angle for an XC bike. This angle will allow more for aggressive trail usage. So just know that as well. You know, if you're buying an XC bike and you want it to be maybe a little bit more of a do-it-all bike, this is again where the chisel shines out too. It is a little bit more slacker than what we normally see on a XC bike. So comparatively, our Growler 40 is at 64, which is so slack for a hardtail. Puts a smile on my face every time I read a number like that for I'm, if you can't tell already, I am partial to trail bikes. It's the kind of trail riding that I love, and I love technical riding, and you know, I also like to climb, which I know I'm in the minority there. This is a very aggressive hardtail. The Growler is just generally a very aggressive hardtail. A lot of people don't like to use that term, aggressive hardtail or hardcore hardtail, but that is aggressive geometry for a trail hardtail. That's what you're looking for sure, for a head tube angle on a trail bike. The wheelbase, the first thing that comes to mind when I think wheelbase is the nimbleness of the bike. Also stability comes to mind. So the longer the wheelbase, the more stable it's going to be on the descents for sure. Also the longer the wheelbase, the more or less likely you're going to want to use it for XC, which is why it's a trail bike. So our chisel is at 1154 millimeters and our growler is at 1239 millimeters. The longer the wheelbase, the more stable the bike is going to feel. The more stable the bike, the more confidence inspiring on the descents, hence the longer wheelbase on a trail bike compared to the XC bike, which is why it's so important again to know the trails you will be riding and what your riding goals are, like with progression and whatnot. Chainstays, again, the longer the chainstay, the longer the wheelbase. The longer the chainstay, the harder it will be to move the bike around. So the chainstay for our chisel is at 432 millimeters and the chainstay for our growler is at 435 millimeters. People like shorter chainstays on their bikes, generally speaking, because it's easier to jump with and do little jibby tricks with shorter stays. Some bikes even come with adjustable geometry where you can actually shorten or lengthen the chainstays or other points of geometry to your preference. This is why you see very little difference between our two bikes when it comes to chainstay length. This is part of the modern landscape, that's MTB geometry. When people buy a trail bike, they're normally going to progress on little jumps to big jumps and stuff like that. They want to start doing whips and all this, trickery on the bikes. So it's easier. The maneuverability for a shorter chainstay arguably is better than a longer chainstay. That's why you see 29-inch wheel bikes with a 435 mil chainstay length. So obviously when you're looking, so that's kind of what it is about the chainstay length. So again, also with XC bikes, generally speaking, the rule of thumb is they do have much shorter chainstays in order to be precise when navigating XC trails. So obviously when you look at a bike geo chart, there are other frame geo numbers, but the three we just talked about are the ones that are most important to the beginner rider, to the person that's buying a budget hardtail. The other two that I will mention quickly is stem length and seat tube angle. While stem length is a more personal fit characteristic and something you can change very easily, you can't change a frame, but you can change your stem length. Just buy a new stem or a different stem. Generally speaking, the shorter the stem, the better the front end handling. Which, when I first started mountain biking, I thought, how is that even possible to think that? How does a shorter stem make your bike handle better? Well, I'm telling you, it does. I personally run a 35 mil. I would go up to a 40, but I run a 35 millimeter stem length. Usually, but not always, you will see a longer stem on an XC bike. Also, when talking about the seat tube angle, the steeper it is, the better it puts you in a good position to climb. In our case, the Growler is a degree steeper than the chisel, which is surprising, but also not. This is a minor difference, but it shows you that the bike manufacturers are really trying to make do-it-all bikes when it comes to trail bikes. So when you buy a trail bike, you know you're going to be doing some climbing for sure. Maybe not some, but a lot. You want a bike that's comfortable on the climbs and not put you like way back behind the bottom bracket of the bike and just be weird to climb with. To me, trail bikes, the modern trail bike geometry has a much steeper seat tube angle. And then we're seeing this now with, comparatively speaking, with the XC chisel, specialized chisel I have here at a 74 degree angle. So the Growler is 1 degree steeper than the chisel. Now, depending on experience level, some people can feel a 1 degree or 1 millimeter difference. So there is something to be said about seat tube angles. So if you are in the market for a trail bike, you know this by now, then that 75-degree angle is actually really good modern spec for geo. So in the interest of keeping this video short and sweet and to the point, there is much more obviously we could have discussed regarding bike geo, but I want this to be beginner specific and not a geo deep dive. If you want a deep dive in geo, there's plenty of videos, there's plenty of information out there that will deep dive on geometry. But this is basically what you need to know when it comes to your first real mountain bike. The geo numbers we talked about are future-proof numbers. Just know that they're future-proof. That's the point here. And a bike that consisted of these geo numbers will serve you well for years to come. So, you know, the money you spend now, yes, $2,000 is a lot for a bike, but that $2,000 that you spend now will be an investment for the future because you won't need to spend it in the future. Well, you'll probably spend it on upgrades, but we'll get into that next video. So I hope you found this video informative and not too lengthy. And stay tuned to the series as we will talk about bike components on the next video. So take care out there and have fun. Love what you ride.